VBS Anatomum Allied Health Series, Chapter 4, Lecture 5, Spinal and Sympathetic Ganglia. The axons and dendrites that we have learned earlier are meant for making a network of communicating neurons. These collectively transmit sensory or motor impulses as electrical signals. The key junction for this network is the synapse, shown here as a circle, where one or more nerve terminals are aligned close to each other as if they are having a cup of coffee together. Synapses are junctions, signature junctions present all over the nervous system. Here they transfer neurotransmitters from one end of the cell process to the other end of the adjacent cell process. In the peripheral nervous system, however, these synapses are particularly well seen at two locations, spinal ganglion and sympathetic ganglion. We will now take a brief histological tour of these two ganglia. Now you can see in this diagram, we have located the spinal ganglion. On the left of the diagram is the silhouette of the human being. The marked in yellow is the outline of the spinal cord. The larger circle shows a cross section of the spinal cord, and emerging from the spinal cord, the dorsal and the ventral root on either sides. A little proximal to the point where the ventral root and the dorsal root join to form the mixed spinal nerve, marked in red double circle, is the dorsal root ganglion, also known as spinal ganglion, which is the topic of discussion right now for our topic. Now that spinal ganglion hosts the synapses, which we are going to describe in detail in the next few slides. Now you see, there are two photographs here. One is the larger actual histology view of the spinal ganglia, and here on the adjacent side is the diagrammatic representation. The key cell of each of these synapses is the pseudo unipolar cell. Here there is a cluster of neurons in one location. That's why it's called a ganglion. That the cell type is known as pseudo unipolar because unlike a normal nerve where it has dendrites and axons, here the pseudo unipolar has only one process, which is both a dendrite and the axon. It goes away from the cell for a little bit, and then it splits into two, one towards the central nervous system, one away from the nervous system. The one away from the nervous system receives signals, electrical impulses from the periphery of the body. The one towards the central nervous system is the part that goes into the spinal cord. Now we will examine correspondingly the same pseudo unipolar cell in the adjacent larger histological view. Now you see that is the pseudo unipolar. You can see around the cells are fairly large, and there is a small halo, white halo, which makes them even more obvious. There are several cells, that's why this cluster is known as a ganglion. Now the details of which is not so clearly visible in this low power. We will see it at a higher magnification. Now you see, this is the high power view of a few ganglion cells. You can see the cell soma is very, very well seen. The nucleus is also seen, and in one corner you can see the process, which is incomplete because it hasn't gone through the section, but that's the place where the extension or the cell process, which will go out and divide into a proximal and a distal branch. Further, there are two other things that can be identified in this high power view. One is around the cell, around the neuron, the ganglionic neuron, you can see flat cells. They are the support cells or the satellite cells. Also seen are the postganglionic axons emerging from the ganglion. This could either be going into the central nervous system, or this could actually be coming in from the peripheral parts of the body into the ganglion. You cannot make out the distinction between the two, but definitely those are the axonal processes. That was a small review of the spinal ganglion component of this discussion on sympathetic ganglia. Thank you.